All right, everybody, welcome to Daz's Friday Zoom. Today is just open chit chat, hang out, ask questions, state opinions. Don't be shy, jump forward, turn your camera on. Daz, if you could just kind of keep an eye on the chat if some good questions arise there. So, is there anybody that has an opening statement?
Well, I have a question if you want to start.
Question and statement? Let's do it. Go ahead.
Okay. So, last time you guys gave me some tips on how to deal with remote viewing an event. And I got some feedback just recently, which was I did this session about it was like a biological target. And what I drew in my sketch looked like flying saucer or something. It came in, it landed, and then it interacted with some command personnel, and then it left. And the actual target was about um, your cellular boundary and something sort of like contacting it and interacting with it. Okay. And this was sort of to investigate cellular consciousness. So, anyway, I misunderstood the target, even though my sketch actually showed something contacting a surface and interacting with something intelligent that had a sense of command, which I guess would be the cell nucleus. But um, I guess the word is anthropomorphic, is where you turn something into a human attribute. Everything that I perceived, I turned into like a human being. So it was interacting with a commander, and the thing that was it was in contact with was some sort of non-surface structure, and I think all of that was because I did not have a sense of scale. I didn't have a sense of size. This was the first biological target that I've ever done. So this concept that something could be smaller than me is new to me, and remote viewing something like that is not something that I'm used to like dealing with. And so I guess I'm hoping that you guys might have some tips on how I can sort of assess a size when I'm remote viewing a target.
Yeah, there's a few things there. One, I was going to ask you because I did see it, and do you have any military background yourself?
No, but I do have a lot of engineering background, and I think that might have been um, evident in the way that I sketch out my targets. It's sort of like very sort of engineering like.
Well, yeah. What I wondered, I mean, I would assess that, and again, this is just an opinion, is what you would kind of call AOL signal line. So, in other words, you have the elements, you have the cells, you have the commander, and the commander of the immune system could be, you know, the vitality intelligence that actually directs and monitors the autonomic nervous system. So there's a lot of possibilities there, but unless you had some deep biological knowledge, you wouldn't have the vocabulary in your preconscious to correctly label those things.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I mean, is that because I need to be investigating the size of the target, Russell? I
Well,
didn't do that. I just thought, oh, it's a intelligent, thing. It must be sort of on the scale of human size.
yeah, there's so many things about that. At a certain point, what is size? I mean, we're only referring it to something else, a yardstick or something. If you did, let's say you yourself took a micro position, then the size would be relative. It would appear, if you're scaled down, whatever you're viewing is going to appear just as it would if you were scaled up, right?
Right.
So that's one of the things that uh, is important for all of us, especially if we're doing an operational session, to remember that if we don't have the technical knowledge and we do something, an analyst does have, if they get a specialist for whatever the target is. So an analyst could look at that and go, oh, there's a T cell, there's this, there, and they could understand our more primitive interpretation of it. So that's why we just document and describe without worrying about correctness. I did one scientific solution to a problem session, and I didn't have the language for it. But so I say, oh, the shiny thing is radiating heat. Okay, this happened to have a connection to a nuclear submarine. So an analyst could look and go, okay, yeah, the shiny thing is the binary inverse relay, blah, blah, blah. And the heat is, okay, so we have to keep in mind, there's no way we're going to have the broadest spectrum of knowledge in every possible tasking.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
I realize I won't have the terminology,
In
but
terms of the size, I've had one experience where it was really weird, but I even noted I felt like I got really super small and shrunk down, and it was an odd sensation for maybe 30 seconds, and it turned out that it was microbiological critters in a pond that they were looking at, but I literally had the sensation of shrinking, and that was interesting. If you
so you're saying I shouldn't worry about.
Well, no, I can't. Obviously, I can't tell you what you should do. Each of us has such unique perceptions. So I'm just giving a perspective. I'm sure Daz, and I know Daz has done some small scale or micro viewing, so he can kick in next. All I'm saying, if I guess the thing I would say, if you were worried every single session about what the size of the scale is and
Right.
made an inquiry, I could see where that could become a blockage to a flow of data.
Well, right. I know. Yeah, that's right.
So,
There needs to be a
so
way
not
to.
knowing the solution, let's see what Daz has to say. But it was, and the other thing too, and I put it out there, I really enjoy the character quality of your. I said sketching, and you said it wasn't really a sketch, but with your illustration, there's just something about it
Right.
really appealing, and so once you get that put together with your progression in accuracy, that's going to be really neat. It's a nice, pleasing presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Daz.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Cool. So is it that you were worried about the scale in the session that you were at, or you couldn't determine what the scale was, or did you want to measure to find a scale?
Well, let me see. How do I describe it? Everything I drew in my illustration. That's a good term, Russell. Thank you. Looked like a human. I had some humans pointing, at the thing. There was a commander who I draw as like a head and shoulders facing the thing. I had an arrow with the word interaction between this commanding person and the non-surface structure. So it was like when I finally got the feedback, I felt like I was close but no cigar, kind of a thing. And that was because I didn't have any concept of how to measure the size on this thing. And I'm pretty sure I've seen you do this on one of your programs, one of your TV programs, and does it just come to you, or do you actually have a technique where you probe it?
Sometimes, but I probe everything. Like in your, if it was in your illustration, was it was that based on previous data? Like when you drew the characters, like the commander and the other ones, and you said they look like humans.
Right.
Was that from previous data that you'd received, that you'd probed, and it actually determined that they were humans and so on?
No. What I got in my session was sort of a vague description of somebody who had authority, who could commit resources. Human was never mentioned. It said that it had an oscillating
I think that's where you're
personality.
drawing. I think that's where you're probably drawing a conclusion. Yeah, and we shouldn't do that with any kind of sketch and stuff. I mean, that's why we probe the elements in sketch. I get a feeling that the elements that you were describing, which looked like humans, were just probably indicators for you at this stage because you hadn't probed them, that it was actually life forms or part of life forms. You know, it was some kind of biological thing.
Okay, so in other words, don't call it a human unless I actually
yeah, unless you've probed it, touched it, and you know, and it's soft, it's 6 foot tall, it feels like a male human.
Can I give,
Okay.
oh,
Okay. I'm
can I
sorry.
give input
Yeah,
on size? Yeah, it's Julie.
yeah, Julie, go ahead.
Well, we've had times that I got someone viewing Orange Blossom, and I knew she'd well, it seemed like she was inside an orange, and so I sort of said to her, because she came across a barrier, I said to her, look, you're remote viewing, so you can go through. So she went through, and then I thought, well, if she's in the orange, there'll be a pith in the center. So I got her to go to where I thought the center of the orange would be. And yes, she went up and down that center. So I knew she'd shrunk herself. And then we had another time that she'd actually landed on a passport that we were looking for, and she got red and gold underneath her. And this was totally blind to her. And so I thought, well, that sounds like she's got the passport. So if she's shrunk herself, and let's see if she can find the edge of the passport and the sort of pages in between. So I got her to find the edge of the passport, perceived that it was the papers in between, and it was an actual passport because we managed to get the person to find it. So I realized then that she tended to shrink herself. But in the situation you're experiencing, so these days when I work with her, I try to establish at certain stages, right, are you your normal size? So that's a question that I will ask her directly. And if not, has she shrunk herself? Has she grown herself? And for
You're
whatever
doing
reason,
this as a task, as a monitor now, right?
as a monitor, because
Yeah.
I prefer to work with a monitor if I can. And the viewer ideally will always be blind, but may not always be. But these times she has been blind. But in your situation, why does it really matter what size it was?
I just want to, be as accurate as possible.
No, but what is accuracy? Because size in those circumstances, if you're talking beyond human stuff, it's only humans that have decided on size anyway. And when you think of the aura of a person, can be shrunk to the size of that physical person, or could be massive. I mean, when you think of the Dalai Lama's aura is absolutely, miles even. And so what is it about that particular target that bothered you about size? And that's what I'd more be looking at. Why am I bothered about size? What is it telling me that I need to know about size on this site?
I just was reacting to the fact that I was calling something a human when in fact it was more like the nucleus of a cell.
Yeah, so you better not to label as human, because is that helping you anyway? And just keep detached from that without the labels to explore more about the site that you need to know. So you actually knew that energetically in some way it was much more than a human, probably. Would that make sense?
Well, that's right. That's right. The perceptions that I got about this commander, it never called it a human. It seemed like it was oscillating back and forth, and it had resources, and it had some sort of control. And I wrote a big question mark there, and I said commander, leader, like because I'm trying to like understand how to diagram this stuff. So
But this head on, I've seen Daz's recent thing that he put on Facebook, and the site that they were viewing that is beyond humans. And it's like, just realize that you might be beyond humans. And then it's like your ego is restricting you. Just go with it and trust what you're getting rather than try to minimalize it to us and our human thoughts.
uh, okay, so yeah, I get that, and I get um, what Des was saying about, don't declare something as a human unless I continue to probe it and verify that it is.
It's a sketch. And
yeah.
we're taught sketches can be from any angle, any direction, any shape, any size. You can't verify anything unless you probe it to find out what it is and its relationship to everything else on the page.
Yeah, and Don, one thing now, I didn't realize. So this was a post-session illustration where you were trying to represent everything in the session.
That's more accurate, right?
Okay,
I was looking at my data, trying to figure out what does it all mean.
Right
I can see
there,
something.
bingo, stop trying to figure out what does it all mean. That's the error. You see, figure out. So I didn't realize that. I would want to see your in-session spontaneous sketches to see what elements they showed. And this is a thing, and this is purely it takes one to know one, and I say this with tremendous compassion and significant failure behind me. The urge to be right will kill you. It will kill your session. It will kill your product. And at some point, that will start to take more precedence than the subtle incoming images or descriptions. So to try to take a session to what in certain instructions called an analytical drawing, there may be a place for that, but probably not right now. So did you do a written summary?
Yeah, the written summary, because I was turning everything into humans, like, didn't bear any relationship to reality.
Did you ever in your session have AOL break human?
No.
Okay, there's another skipped step. So no matter what modality one is using, that's an important thing. You have to objectify that, set it aside, as some people call it, declare it, whatever, but get that out of your mental processes and onto the paper at some point. So if you look back at your session and saw organization, instruction, command, okay, that's probably good data. So especially, I don't know how much you know about the immune system and how some of that works, but it tends to appear, now they're finding this second brain in our gut, and I've seen scientists refer to it basically as a command center. And it's identifying whatever the, say, intruder is, and then it's sending out white cells, T cells, macrophages to eat up the debris from the dead cells. So there's a lot going on there. And it really is like troops being sent out into the field or the body system to address something. So if you have these concepts and you try to label them, then you're going to do, so this analytical sketch, it falls closer to what I was suspecting in the first place, which is AOL signal. The data came from the signal line, but you laid a big AOL over it interpretively, wanting to be accurate, wanting to be right, wanting, and like I say, please understand, I'm not faulting you. I literally have prayed for a left brain lobotomy before. in the learning phases of this. And, Paul has, pounded the table more than once when I would get caught up in that. I said, well, I'm getting this impression. How should I interpret it? Paul, put it on the paper and just keep going. And so eventually, once I finally broke down, I just said literally out loud to my left brain, how many times do you want to be wrong? How much tolerance for being wrong do you have? And then right there, I don't care anymore. I just literally, and it's an unbelievable step for me, being right and being analytical and, being the one that knows everything and caring for caring.
I see what's going on here.
Yeah.
This is yet another. Learning this is a little bit iteration like. It's like you first realize you need to declare things as AOLs, but then you encounter these other sorts of AOLs, which I guess I'm just now encountering. I'm reaching a certain level of success, but now I want to be right at that level, and I'm turning other things into AOLs. And okay, I see what's going on.
Yeah,
and I think this is what Julie was saying too. Is
yeah,
like
no,
I don't need to like chase some of this stuff down.
Right, exactly. And here's part of being right literally was like a 50 some year lifestyle for me. So to get to the point, like you say, in these increments or iterations, and those iterations don't stop, they keep coming. And that's the fascinating and fun part of this. It just, those iterations keep coming and your ability. But so it was a little bit like, well, okay, maybe I shouldn't care about being right. Well, trying to be right really isn't helping me. And it just was a gradient to, I don't give up if I'm right anymore. And that was a hard surrender. That I mean, like I said, that's 5 decades of wanting to be right about
Well,
it.
I think it's like a continued surrender, is because you keep encountering it at different levels,
Right.
and you have to keep surrendering this thing. So okay, I'm sort of.
So at this point, and I, again, whoever your instructor is, follow your instructor. But at this point, work on a literalization of your session in a written format. I got the sense of organization, direction, whatever your actual form said.
Yeah.
Putting things in your summary that were not in your session will lead to all kinds of bad things.
Okay.
So when you do,
it's very interesting. I approach this as one sort of a problem, and I think you actually brought me back to the genuine problem, which is, I'm overlaying the data that I'm getting in my session with AOLs and reporting in my summary like this confabulation. So
right. And so when you're, I'm not sure what stage 4 template you're using, but if on the far right, it has AOL signal line, the reason that gets included in stage 4 is because when we're getting data, we feel the data is good, but we can only come up, or our preconscious can only come up with an analogy for it because we don't have the lexicon.
So the analogy is okay then, I guess, the point.
Just write down over there under the AOL signal line, you say, it reminds me of a toaster, or it feels like a battlefield commander.
Okay.
Or,
you know what? You've answered my question, actually.
okay.
I'm getting the notion of what's got to happen here.
And like I say, an analyst, especially, I presume you're going to keep chasing this for some time, and you might end up working in full-on operational sessions. Keep in mind, the project manager and the analyst are the only ones that need to figure out what it is. You as a viewer, and like I say, man, if I had $1 for every stack of paper around here,
Yeah.
I would have enough money to go on a little vacation.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks a lot.
Did Julie, did you have anything you wanted to add? Is there anybody else that had a comment on this topic?
No, well, I've put some comments in the comment thing, and it's really, why do we need to know, and get your ego out of the way so that you don't need to know and just deliver? But it's that perception of you're sort of almost thinking, am I my size? Am I logicking this? And you need to record that wondering. So
Mhm.
you'd put that on the right-hand side as a wondering,
Mm.
why am I even thinking this? Or whatever comes out. And then when you're writing your summary, you really stick to the left-hand side and bring all that information together. And as you've got used to doing remote viewing, you sort of do it, coordinating it in rather than when it came in the time of the session, so that it links things together, but not beyond what you actually did. And then anything that's on the right-hand side, you might put in brackets in the summary to highlight that you think it's still relevant, but you need to really make sure you express that as this is AOL, and then hopefully the client or whoever's coordinating it will emphasize that it is AOL, which, you know, loads of people won't understand what AOL means, but it's basically, you know, we're not labeling it, we're not totally sure on this, but it seems like, or there's a energy of it. And when you think of what Russell said about our immune systems, I mean, our immune systems are keeping us alive, so they're massive. And when you really think of that, and you know, it might be so small, but it could kill somebody. And so that energetically is massive, isn't it?
Mhm.
But you
Right.
don't need to be thinking that. It's just record what you're getting, and it's recording it in a way that people realize, I'm not quite sure about this, but I need to express it. And if you don't put it down, you can't include it in your summary. And I mean, really, there's been so many times I've taught people and then they've said, oh, yeah, well, I got that. Well, you didn't write it down, so you can't record it.
Right.
And yes, we do have a laugh about it, but when you're dealing with a life or a death, it makes a significant difference. And this is where, if you're doing a live task that you're being paid for, you really need to just deliver that information with empathy, but detach from that information. Yeah, but it sounds like you're doing wonderfully, Don, honestly.
I'm enjoying the success, and you know, I'm sort of like wondering what the next steps are, which is why I'm asking these questions. And I think the feedback here is actually pretty interesting. Is sometimes you don't need to press.
But
Sometimes you just
you're
need
so
to like
engaged.
report what you got, and that's learning how to report what you get. This is like I never
Oh,
even thought of that as a skill. Now I'm realizing this is a skill.
but just
So
get it down there and don't try to be too perfect.
yeah, yeah.
It's perfection that actually don't do it. And the number of times I've seen people, particularly when they're doing the basic training, and they say, oh, right, it's a table. So, and then they do like, you know, 3-year-olds do and start putting 4 legs on a table just because they thought it was a table. It's like, well, that actually wasn't what you drew first. So stop trying to draw a table now and just go with what there was. In the remote viewing thing that Daz had put on today, he got this thing that at one point he said it was almost like a flying saucer, but then he really went to what he perceived, and he perceived that sort of shape, but he wasn't labeling it as a flying saucer because it might have been, but who's to know what it was? But Don, honestly, I'm glad that you're engaging and bothering to talk, because so many people could be saying some of this stuff, but they're not. But you're helping the whole community realize their own stuff. So
Absolutely.
thank you very much. Yeah.
And Julie, speaking of helping people, I had never thought of the scale of importance. That's really a good insight, because, you know, if I've got this beach and I'm worried about every aspect of the beach being to scale, and in the middle of the beach, the target is where is the landmine, I'd probably prefer the landmine be a little bigger in the scale
Oh, yes.
than,
Well,
you know,
yeah.
so
No,
I've
Mike
never
Webster,
thought of the scale of importance. So thank you.
yeah. Well, Mike Webster, who I trained with, who sadly passed away in 2016, when he worked for the Navy, they were doing some test stuff with radar. and they'd got a big ship that had got a sort of dilapidated boat that they were pulling, and they were supposed to be targeting the dilapidated ship. But because the big ship that was pulling it was more significant, they actually ended up hitting that big ship.
Mhm.
And that's what we do in remote viewing. And I've had that so often, even when Mike passed away, I happened to be viewing with my friend on that day, and I went to her remote viewing papers instead of what I was supposed to be viewing in her house that I was blind to and she was blind to some extent. But the significance of Mike's death at that moment that we were viewing, and I got an angel there, and I knew I shouldn't have been there. And that all came out in the viewing of everything I wrote. But then 2 hours after, his wife rang me to tell me that he'd just passed away. And it's like, oh, so that's why I was there and what I was doing. So, and I know in the basic remote viewing training that I have, they talk about the American military person, I can't remember who it was, who was supposed to be viewing a sort of hut in a forest place, but there was a big military place just nearby. And that's where they ended up going. And he was told that he'd got the wrong place. And he went up there to find out what he really had got and found this secret place. So, of course, he was much more interested in that.
Yeah.
And that's what we do in everyday life. So, yeah, but you're doing brilliantly. And thank you, Russell, for these sessions, and Daz, because it's lovely to have this discussion.
Yeah, it is. Thank you very much.
Well, yeah, I like it. And when Daz, you know, he pays me $1,500 an hour to co-host, so I can't resist. All right. So I see, oh, Rich, your hand is no longer up. Are you there, Rich? I saw your hand up. Okay. Rich is not there. Daz, do you see any questions in the chat?
Not so far. There's one there, but I don't understand it at the moment, so I'm asking them to clarify it.
Oh, okay, great. Or if they want to pop on video, just pop on video and let's, you know, clarify it on the fly. In the meantime, is there anybody else? Comments, questions, anything?
Well, I have another question,
Sure.
but I didn't want to take up everybody's time here. But
It's a vacant slot. Jump on.
okay. Okay. So, of all of the techniques that I learned in the previous session, the one about determining when an event occurred, the advice I got was to draw a timeline with a kind of a scale, and I could use some sort of like a scheme to like go back and forth and sort of get an idea of when the event was occurring. So I did do that. And basically what I did, Russell, was I just used my pen and I was just going back and forth. And when I felt like it hit a nice stopping point, I drew a line, and that turned out to be 1960 or something like that. So, but the thing is, you mentioned dowsing.
Correct. The first time I did it, and in fact, the only time I did it was in Paul's advanced course. He gives you a really nice little dowsing kit, and then you get half a day of dowsing, and then you go in and you do a stage 1 through 6 session all the way through the clay model, summary, everything. And then after that session, and presumably while you're still connected to the target, we had to come close to, well, I mean, you want to identify the timeline. Now, this event had took place over several days, and the window that I had was 150 years. And so,
Okay. So let me just ask you: did you have something like a 1 to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000 in your scale? How did you do your scale? And the other thing was,
it was 10. It was 10-year increments with, 10 little dots. So I had a long line and then a bunch of little dots and then a long line. So it was a 10-year segmented 150-year timeline, where essentially right in the middle of it was a 5 or 6 day event.
Okay, did it go into the past and future, or just now into the past?
So
Or
the singular goal was to try to date the event. So
so you didn't know whether it was in the future or past?
I knew it was in the past.
Okay, all right.
Because when you're training, you only do events that have solid feedback. So I knew, because there was feedback going to be given, that the event was known and thus concluded.
Okay.
You would not get future events without feedback in training scenarios.
Okay.
So I think I showed you my little dowsing.
I saw that, and I
Right.
did not use a little pendulum. I just used my pen in my hand, and that's a pretty rough thing compared to what you were doing. with a
Not
pendulum.
necessarily. I mean, people do it with sticks. So that's probably just fine. This was training, for a specific purpose. So what I did was I just made one fairly quick pass over the whole thing, which was, well, it was on a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper sideways, so it was probably 10 inches. Okay, so I just kind of went across it slowly and just felt a little something and made a note. And then when I got to the other end, I came back across and felt a little something and made a note. So that left me like 2 inches. Then I went over that 2 inches and it closed the gap. So I ended up 6 days before the event. So I was 6 days off.
I remember you saying that.
Right.
And okay, but you didn't mention this thing about bracketing the ends off. That's very interesting. I like that.
Well, I try to keep some secrets, Don. So I moved in. So let's say the first mark was here and here, and that left me, 6 inches. So then I worked that 6 inches, and this was under coaching by Bill Ray. So he's like, okay, so go ahead and and narrowed it down. So to me, to come, and there was truly a sensation there. The problem is when I got into the smaller area, so I could have taken that scale maybe and blown it up. So now I'm down to let's say 2 months. I could have made that 10 inches and worked that, but just for the purpose of the exercise. But you could sense it, and I think you could sense it with a pen, a stick, whatever tool. Some people use those say brass rods, I think, or whatever they are. That again, I believe, becomes a preference. I just like my little silver chain with a stone on it.
Okay, I think you've actually answered my question, because I was thinking that first of all, I went into this thinking this is something I haven't tried before. I even wrote in my session, experimental, first time trial, whatever. Maybe this is a practice thing, the more
Absolutely.
practice.
You've got to, it's just like remote viewing. In retrospect, it's in the rear view mirror after you get your feedback, when you go through your session and you find out you were right about purple. Now you can remember when purple came in, it was real quiet and kind of, and I was wrong about tall, let's say. And then like, yep, sure enough, I remember tall was like tall and purple was subtle, however it works for each individual. So it's in retrospect that you can remember what it was like in the session, so that in the future, when it happens in another session, it doesn't guarantee it. Okay, next time I get a subtle thing, it's always going to be right. That doesn't pan out either, but it gets you in the ballpark. So with the dowsing, it has to be practiced, because I remember, I was shocked. I almost like dropped the thing, because the first time I had a thing, a hit, if you will, I mean, it was like a fish had nibbled on the thing. And I remember just thinking, and I actually said it out loud, where did that come from? And Paul has developed a 2-day dowsing course, which unfortunately got canceled because of COVID. I was going to take that. So I was literally shocked. And then when we did these other things, there's something happening there. I don't know what it is or how to explain it. I haven't really looked into dowsing as deeply. I've got Paul's dowsing DVD set here, which I'm fixing to crack open and do now that I'm finished with most of the courses. But yeah, definitely practice every bit of it. And what in life isn't? You had to practice driving. You had to practice your alphabet. You had to practice walking. It's no different.
All right. I think I got the idea here,
Okay.
Russell. Thank you.
All right. Hey, Rich, I saw your hand up. I called on you and you were gone. Do you still have a question?
Yes, I did. Sorry about that. I had another work call I had to take. I'm sorry, but
Problem.
yeah, no. I actually had a question for you, Daz, and I heard part of what Don was saying earlier, so maybe this was asked, but I just saw your video from your. I think it was remote viewed. I don't think it was the crypto viewing. Maybe it was where you had the template, right? And you were going through, hey, steps 1 to 3 coalesce. So for whatever reason, I never thought about like, oh my God, let's make a template so that I always feel like I'm being pulled away from my little Zen state because then I got to switch gears and be logical with my temp forms and everything like that. But at the end of your video, you said, hey, this is good for beginners, but you don't want to keep using this or doing this. A, did I understand correctly? B, if so, why? Why would it not be beneficial to just always use a template?
Yeah, I did say that, and it's in the text that accompanies it as well. I mean, I literally just created that for someone to run through a couple tests to see if they had any natural ability and if they wanted to take it further, really.
Yeah.
Because the host CRV method and the way it was created and the way you have all this mechanism where you write the page number, stage number, and all your bits and pieces, that's a process that occupies your mind. It gives you something to do so that as you're moving between those stages as well, you don't start wanting to work out what the target is and you're not asking that. So it's almost like, I find it almost like a really clever distraction device to stop me from, saying, what is it? What's it going to be? Because you're focusing on page number at the top left, your name in the top right, and so on. And if you have that in a template, I think you miss that part of the process. Plus, we know as well from lots of research that writing things down physically with a pen and paper or a pen and tablet, whatever you want to use, does actually ingrain it more in your synapses as muscle memory rather than a template system.
Interesting. That's cool. That's an interesting point of view of how it's distracting, but it's beneficial that it's distracting. Okay, cool. I just wanted clarification on that. Thanks.
I'm not sure if Russell's there right now, but there's a question in the window if anyone's got an answer to this. Okay, so Annalisa asked a question, and it's has anyone found that the use of camera during a CRV session when you're recording it, has anyone encountered it polluting the signal in any way? Does it invalidate the intent, or does it interfere with the signal? I'll start off with my opinion on this because I've done several on video now, and I don't think so, to be honest. Again, it probably works a little bit more in your favor because when I'm doing videos for other people anyway, and for production, because I tend to be the only person in the room. I'm essentially the remote viewer, the sound person, and the video cameraman at the same time. So I find that any jitters about doing the RV session live on camera kind of go, because you're also worrying about, is the mic set up? Is the camera looking at you? Is it all in focus? So that almost acts a little bit to me like the distraction techniques of the CRV sessions when you're writing the stage numbers. You're so distracted with what's happening with the setup that it takes your mind off it and it helps you. But I haven't seen any physical reasons why having a camera on would destroy the signal, because we don't, the signal's theoretical anyway. We don't know if there is a real signal. But I don't know about you guys. If any of you guys have encountered anything different, then let us know. Anyone got any thoughts on that one? Not many people video their sessions, I guess.
No, I was thinking about it just so I had a better record, I guess, or something easier. Do you get better, worse, anything like that between just writing it down versus just recording yourself on the whiteboard?
No. I mean, the whiteboard thing's a different thing than camera. Because you can record yourself on camera, but using sheets of paper.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So the whiteboard would be a different thing because that is better because it's whole body kinesthetic action, standing up, moving
Okay.
around, arms, legs, everything being involved. Whereas most CRV, for most people, a lot of it is sat down at a table, really only moving your arms and stuff at first.
I just put that whiteboard up for that very reason. So.
Yeah.
Hey, Rich, I missed. I was beckoned upstairs for a second, so I missed the template question. I'll throw in a contribution on that. I learned with a template. So when I started training with Ed Dames in 2010, he has full series or system, if you will, of templates that you use. My girlfriend, Nancy, she also learned with that template. And then our housemate, Catherine, learned with that template. So we all started out with TRV. When I quit that and then had a 6-year just where I was interested and studied and participated in the social aspect, and then decided to go with Paul, it's hard to explain. It was like, like if you take an injured animal that you've rehabbed and opened the cage and set it free into the woods, that's how I felt. It was so dynamic. And Paul's like, wow, I mean, it's like you really had a realization. I'm like, yeah. And so when I was uncaged, so to speak, it was a really different experience. Now, Nancy, my girlfriend, and our housemate Catherine also then decided to switch over to CRV, and they trained with Paul's DVD. And then I gave them some, a little bit of assistance from taking Paul's courses. They loved it, and both of them had to step up in their product. The idea, and this comes straight from Ingo, the idea is to ingrain the template into your practice to the point it becomes a neuro template, neuroplasticity. You'll actually build new information pathways in your physical brain. Your mind will come into alignment with that. And that's where the C, originally for coordinate, but Ingo then later changed it to control. That's where the control comes in. So when I get too fuzzy or groggy to stay on track, I'll actually utilize the old bilocation break. And the bilocation break is designed for drifting off, having too much attention perhaps on the site and not managing your forms, or if you're just too much in the session room and not enough. So it works both ways. So like there's a point where I'll see my spelling start to degrade and I can notice my own handwriting, and I can keep going and stay in structure. But there was a buildup to that. So now to find whatever the balance is of being in the room and having the template ingrained by hundreds of sessions, and at first, especially in the classes, and then in the subsequent 10 homeworks after the classes with Paul, you get a lot of red ink. And when you take those corrections and then you build them in, and then you control how much attention you have here, how much attention you have in the session room, and it does start to equalize where you can get a little spacier and still stay in structure. So that, again, that's a thing of practice. So the training wheels of the template can be very useful as an initial reminder, but sometimes templates can prompt you to something where there might not be something there. So as an example, in the TRV template, it'll say colors or sounds. Well, let's say that there's no sound at this particular location. Now my mind wants to put some sounds on the paper because sounds have been asked for. So it might make up some sounds. And I saw that experientially in my own work. So I think the tool that Daz just created is brilliant because 500 people have come in. So, well, where do I start? How do I, I don't even, and Paul had done a nice, simple session format video, which is really useful. But this idea to take a brand new person and give them a sense of structure and have the documents to go with it and the whole thing, I think it's brilliant. But I like he said, I would only use it the same way I'd use training wheels. And as soon as I could ride the bike, I'd take those things right off.
That's very interesting points. I was thinking about it in a completely 180-degree view perspective, because I was thinking, well, why just limit it to a beginner? That'd be great just to do for, the entirety of it. But yeah, all that certainly makes sense.
Think of the old, wax on, wax off. That was to build a physical template in your brain. I mean, actual little neurons are growing and reaching for each other and connecting. And when that happens, that becomes your template. And as soon as that is, I'll say automated or maybe automatic, now you can put more attention on the sight. And I've used the analogy before of driving. First time you drive, you're just, oh my God, there's a yellow line. Oh no, there's the white line, and you're just going back and forth. And after 5 years of driving, you're playing with the radio, looking at the view, and whatever it is. So it's kind of like that. Build that template into your own biology.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
I think on the camera thing, it depends on, is somebody going to be watching it? Or is it just a camera that's there for you to sort of review your session afterwards as well? Because that will change the energy of that camera, just as a thought.
Yeah, I in fact, I just not too long ago did my first session, which was an operational session, and it was requested as part of the tasking to record. And it upped my self-consciousness, 5 notches. And I think perhaps the purpose, I haven't gotten the feedback on the session, but perhaps the purpose was to see, because it wasn't like the camera being focused on the paper, it was on you. And I think possibly that was to see reaction or expression. And so we're always supposed to narrate our sessions out loud. And so I did that. It took, I don't know, maybe took 10 minutes into the session for me to forget that the camera was on. Now I could do it. And again, it's just another element. You just put it there. If it's a one-man band, or like Daz says, he does these things on the bus. So it's just a thing, but yeah, it upped the the self-consciousness for sure. All right, Daz, any questions in the chat?
Yes, there's one from Gino regarding missing elements and timelines. I recently got involved in some sessions with great accuracy, but I'm not sure if I'm viewing the last location known by the owner or the actual one. So I keep asking them to include the word now in the queue. Is there another way to prompt for an actual location? And I think this is on missing items or objects.
Go for it, Daz.
I'm just trying to work out the question here a second. I'm not sure if I'm viewing the last known location. I mean, when I work for missing persons targets, I did a thing. It's not like dowsing, but I literally on the sheet of paper, I used to write. I used to do a little circle on the sheet of paper and write there. This is me standing in the exact last known location of this missing person, and I'm now looking north. And I drew a little arrow going north as well. And then I used to say to myself, okay, from here, which direction is the person now? And I would kind of have a feeling of where that would be. And I would literally draw a line, it could be anywhere. So north would be up, I would draw a line down there. So that would be something like southwest or something. And then I would also, on the same line, I would ask myself, okay, I know they're in this direction. Roughly how far away are they from me? And I would just like run my finger along the line, and that would then give me a distance as well. I would literally just write that down in miles. And I would use that then to try to find a point when I add feedback on Google Earth. So that's one way I find things. But that's not to do with the queue itself. That's me in session using something to find it.
Right. And on the, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Julie.
It's a very big question, and it depends what you're looking for. And we had an earring that had gone missing, and it was an emotional attachment. And I know we were just doing a practice weekend, and so I had to respect why we were doing the remote viewing. They weren't paying for it or anything. And I know that we found the earring, and it actually appeared in her lounge. So the back of the earring had been in my lounge just before the remote viewing weekend. And then probably 2 months later, the actual earring itself appeared in her lounge. I know we'd got it, but to have spent our time to actually find it, and I still wonder if we'd remote influenced it to appear for her because she was so emotionally attached. So when you get into remote influencing as well, it's a very complex situation. So if you think of an earring that could have been lost, could have been in her bag, could have been in her clothing, that could have dropped off somewhere, and then to actually find it. So it depends what you're viewing, why you're viewing it, and setting the intention. Even if you were to perceive it now, in 10 minutes time, it could be somewhere completely different. So yeah, it's very complex. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, I'm reading the question in the chat, and I'll toss an element in here. It was a transition that I had to make from TRV to CRV. So Ed Dames had tasked us originally to perceive at the time of the photograph. I had a couple of interesting experiences where I actually included the photographer in the session. And one of them, I actually tracked this poor guy down on the internet because the feedback image was from his website, and clarified, and the things that I perceived that were outside of his photograph were factually there. Then when I started working with Paul, some interesting things happened. And it was like, and he's like, what is your time frame? When are you viewing? So he preloaded the notion, always, at least for his practice targets, view at the time of the session. And that changed things for me. That was very interesting. So those targets obviously are going to be targets that are going to be stationary there for some time. Now, if you get tasked, let's say you get tasked of a ship on the ocean, you would need to have it viewed at the time the photo was taken, because you don't know where the ship is now and you can't get feedback. So there's a whole spectrum there. In Pam's psychic detective training, she actually did a outbounder where a gentleman was going to be out for the whole day. And she set up cues. Where will so-and-so be at 11 o'clock? Where will so-and-so be at 12 o'clock? And there were some interesting results with that. The time factor. So now I defer to whatever the tasking is. So I could get a tasking is, where is this object, or where was this object last seen, or where will this object be in a week? So if that's embedded in the tasking, generally I am starting to pick that up. But as a defer, or as what I defer to as a default, I guess, is at the time of the session. One of the things too, kind of embedded in this question, who asked the question? Gino, okay. Your viewer intention, you can kind of set yourself. If there isn't a clear thing, so when you say, if I'm viewing the last location known by the owner or the actual one, you can intend, given that there hasn't been anything else specified, to view it at the optimum time to solve the problem. So there's, like Julie said, it's a wide spectrum here, but keep in mind, just there's no limits. You as a viewer can decide, your tasker can tell you, there's obviously common sense at certain things. You want to know what it's going to be, a week from now. So just play with that, but realize there's no perfect or set way. So if you're asking your tasker to include the word now in the tasking, what does that mean? Does that mean at the moment he wrote the word now, he or she wrote the word now, or should they specify at the time of the session? So
And that's interesting that you use that word optimum, Russell, because I was working recently just doing some practice, and we've got into the habit of using this term optimum. But what we didn't know was the intention set with the double blind target was that they were in a drone as an optimum. And so when we were asking for, go to the optimum position, we got, well, we're already there, aren't we? And it was so sort of cross that we've never had before, but that's because that was the intention set with that target.
Mhm.
So, yeah, and I love it when we get something different, and it's the surprise that helped us to realize. Yeah, so it was good.
I had two events that were very fascinating where the target was water, and it was just a picture of water. And I both times had put a little tiny structure there, and it's like there was no. And it turned out that what I was doing was including the boat that the photo was taken from. And so just like your drone thing, so there's so many interesting things. And even when it comes to high entropy targets that are really, really interesting, that's not always the case. So let's just say there's a circus going on, and a person is a coin collector, and the thing they're most interested in the world is a little gold coin, from the 1800s. That coin collector is going to go to that coin laying in the dirt as opposed to the circus. It's not always high entropy. It's also driven by your interest. What are you interested in? And there was a situation where I was given a target of a natural land formation. And it would have been in a very super quiet, very isolated area. And about a quarter of a mile away was a uranium mine. And I had trucks and the piles of dirt, a couple of structures, all the noises. And then when I looked at the feedback, of course, I was highly disappointed. And then I decided, okay, I'll just take a little bit of look at this on Google Earth. And sure as heck, even some aspects of my drawing were almost like an aerial view of this mining operation, because there was activity, noise, busyness. So there I went. And as we all, we'll learn where is our interest, how do we respond to entropy, do we block ourselves if there's negative emotions? That is one of the most interesting and, let's say, consciousness or self-expanding aspects of this. You will really find out your tendencies, your bugs, and be able to for the first time see them and then work with them, and that translates into your daily life. So
And that to me is the most important thing, is to know your inclinations, but also to develop the aspects that are, shall we say, weaker. But it's really knowing yourself, but also developing the other aspects of you, so that you get all your strengths as wide and as breadth as you can. But it's when it comes in and you get that surprise, usually the surprise is significant. And if you've got a monitor with you, quite often they can help you with that. Whereas when you're doing it yourself, just self-monitoring, I think you have to be more mindful of your own strengths and weaknesses much more. That's why I love working with a monitor. But it's yeah, knowing your own strengths and developing those areas that you're not usually inclined to.
And if you work, like for instance, I look at say Lori Williams and Jim as an example. If you work with the same person for such a long time, and she mentions this in her book called Monitoring, they know your tendencies, your weaknesses, and so the monitor can kind of out navigate you a little bit. And in particular, I was reviewing one of their sessions not so long ago on Mount Shasta, and you could see where Lori was kind of like intrigued by a certain aspect, and then the way Jim reformulated questions was brilliant. It's like he just somehow knew the exact question to ask, and then boom, out popped the answer. So if you're in a consistent team, I would love to have that. All the monitoring with Angela. Oh, and shoot, that just reminds me. There was a specific request, and maybe we could do it after this. Apparently, we all know that Angela is recovering from a surgery, and apparently Russell Targ is also in the hospital. Is that still the case? Does anybody know? Anyways, it was on the forum, and I had said we will take a minute. There were requests along the lines of like a remote healing or something, but let's take just a quick minute or 30 seconds or whatever. And if anybody wants to either say something, they can jump in and say it, or if they just want to do a private little acknowledgement. Apparently, Angela had to have surgery because of the intensity of it and the anesthesia involved. She woke up a little confused, and she's got a rather long healing path in front of her. So we all know Angela. And so let's just do that. We could either speak of her or a minute of silence. I don't know what everybody's preference in that would be. So I will just say, out loud, I truly and genuinely hope the best outcome for her as a being. She was extremely important in my basic training, and monitored me and took me from almost throwing up from nerves to having a lovely smile and taking the pressure off me, and opened the door for me to relax and show me some tips and tricks and different things. So I'm hugely grateful for her presence in our community. Okay, Angela, we know you can hear us, and we truly all, in each of us, wish you a speedy and super healthy recovery, and we'll look forward to you being back on your feet.
And I think it's her birthday actually today,
Oh,
the
is it?
30th of April. Yeah, I think it's her 75th birthday.
Well,
And
happy birthday too.
she'd taken the whole of April off.
Right.
So some restful time, but not quite in the way that she's ended up. So
Well,
yeah,
Paul thought that might have been an intuitive blessing that she.
yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, that she did slow down and had gotten this time to relax, and then when this came up, to also then have the time to work through it. So, okay. Maybe I don't know the details. I just read something quick. So if there's anything going on with Russell Targ and anybody finds out more about it, let the community know. All right. So Daz, did you see a question? There was one back here. Carla asking about professional remote viewing. Do you want to tackle that first?
Yeah, I can answer it a bit. So the question is, doing remote viewing as a career. I've been doing it for fun, really, by doing the test targets. How would one go about finding an income doing this? And how and where would genuine opportunities arise? Okay, well, I've been doing RV now from practice, probably 22 years or something. I only recently started, I would say, doing RV as a paying career over the last 3 years. So it took me that long. I followed the industry, not the industry, the community, I would say, all that time. And some people, I would say, there's two ways to make money in RV at the moment. One way is to teach. That's always a very good route, and that's been the dominant way to make money for the past 2 decades. You can do client work, but client work tends to be few and far between, unless you're not very picky in what kind of work you want to do, and you do lots of stuff like finding people's car keys and lost cats and all that kind of stuff. The route that we've taken, and the route that other people like Courtney have taken, is by setting up mechanisms where you produce content that people in markets find interesting, and they subscribe to that content, and then that subscriptions can pay you essentially a wage, which is a whole new model and way of doing things, because you don't have a business to client relationship anymore. I think the business to client relationship is probably the hardest, and I don't know anyone other than TDS with Prudence Calabrese around about 10 years ago that successfully did that for a while. Most people only get sporadic work through removing. It's just not that accepted yet. So yeah, it depends what, I can't give you a proper answer. It depends which route you want to go down with that.
Yeah, and there's another aspect. Should you become a project manager or start your own company? But that's layers of experience probably away from most of us. The reality of it is, a lot of times it tends to be somebody reaches out to you. So I had 2 companies reach out to me that I signed contracts with after auditioning, and 95% of the work is pro bono. For me, that's not a problem. I look at that work as reciprocity for the gift of remote viewing. The money that I could have made total in 2 years amounts to $950. It was $250 for a contest that was sponsored to draw attention to a particular product of a person, $200 for a session, and then $500 for a session. And for me, I just had those donated to animal care, whatever the sponsor's choice was, their favorite rehab facility for animals. And I think one was the burned koalas in Australia. The prospect of, like Daz says, if you're thinking that you're going to sustain or support yourself with remote viewing and anything less than, I can't even imagine, 10 years experience, it's kind of a pie in the sky. Another method is, selling books, but the people writing and selling the books are the Stargate people. Daz, who has the decades of experience, Paul, they really, really, really have something to say. So instructing. Now, there's another thing, and Angela, actually, since we're just speaking of her, we talked about, and I've referred a couple of people, she's willing to monitor people online for a fee. But again, you'd have to have a lot of experience as a viewer to know how to be an effective monitor or interviewer. So those are some possibilities. There may be others, but the bottom line in terms of entry level, I'm thinking most of us will be working for, I mean, if you're a phenom, maybe 5 years. If you're good, maybe 10, and if you're like me, 20. It's just going to take some time to get a comprehensive enough understanding to have something of value.
I will add to that, Russell. I did teach a person called Darby. He's not on site, but he does usually come to these. And the moment he finished training with me after a year, he did go straight into paid work with me. But it's not anything that, it's only ARV work, so it's only a couple of $100 here and there. It's not anything that's going to be keeping him, on high on the hog kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the possibility of some supplemental income, sure. That's not something I pursued, so I don't know what that market is. I should have clarified that. So there could, if you have a primary source of income or some financial stability, I'm fortunate as heck. Nancy is our breadwinner, and then I've helped take care of her family and her mom and some other things. So I'm blessed to be able to work at this. Because I'm in a situation where Nancy takes care of our finances. So it's there's a bunch of different possibilities, but the one thing to keep in mind, you have to have some sort of quality product that people are willing to pay for, and that is only going to come with training, practice, and experience. All right. What was the next question there, Des? From Carla? Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. That was Carla. So hopefully we answered that, Carla. Now, what do you see there next, Daz?
Bear with me a sec. There's a comment from Dimmy here, but that's on cameras, but I can read it. She says she's late to the subject of cameras, trying to find her words, but Laurie is talking about micro movements during sessions. That is more relevant in sessions monitored, but if you look back on the post analysis of the session, you might actually observed when you started to be driven in the wrong direction, like AOLing or castle building. So I guess that's it. If you self video yourself, you could see if you got any micro movements that give things away. I don't know on that one because if I video myself, I don't really watch them.
Yeah, and Laurie talks about micro movements in her book Monitoring. All right. So, and thank you to everybody for the well wishes. I'm seeing a bunch of them in the chat for Angela. Okay, so someone did, Julie put in there was a message from Laurie Williams 3 days ago that Russell Targ was in a hospital with pneumonia. No further update. All right. So the next question, does it look like it's from Don?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you think Don has used up his allotment of questions? The first 5 are complimentary, but isn't there a fee? Speaking of making money in remote viewing, Don, why don't you, instead of, I see you've written it out, and I say, how about you just pop your mic on and
Okay, thank you. I am not trying to hog this thing, okay, but I have a lot of questions. Julie mentioned tasking, monitoring, and Russell, you mentioned it a couple of times. And now I'm starting to wonder, okay, suppose I want to run a monitoring session for someone, a friend maybe, Rich, for example. And we spoke about this at one point. Or suppose, we want to, I want to have my daughter who knows nothing about remote viewing monitor me. Is that possible? Is there some sort of I don't know, a guide, a PDF document or something that I'm sort of looking at Daz here. He's the librarian. He seems to have everything. Daz, is there anything around?
I got to be honest. I know some of the teachers do produce it. monitoring is not something that's I believe in or I use in anything that I do, but the
Okay.
other people do.
Okay, so Lori has this book. There. Can you see
Okay.
it?
Yeah.
Okay, it's the only published thing that I've been able to find. And she goes into, sensory words, dimensionals, all this stuff. So in terms of a nice little package that I started with, I recommend this.
Okay. So this is what's the author name again there?
Lori Lambert Williams. So she's Lynn Buchanan.
She's on next week.
Yeah, she's actually on. That's right. I forgot about that. But she's Lynn
She's on
Buchanan trained, and then I believe she was Lynn's first endorsed trainer, going from student to being trainer, because he only allows, I think there's only 4 or 5 people that are allowed to teach his methodology under his quality control.
But also, Don,
Yeah.
actually practice monitoring helps your own remote viewing as a viewer.
Yes.
I
So-
remember you saying that. And so I think I want to experience this.
Well, I've suggested in the chat, if you monitor someone else using, like Daz's resources or Lynn Buchanan's, possibly double blind, but if you don't want to do it double blind, you can know what the target is, particularly as you learn to do the monitoring. And then your wife and daughter or someone that you
My daughter. Okay. But the thing is, all right, here's the thing. There seems to be 2 different cases. One is where the monitor knows what it is and is sort of coaching the viewer by saying like correct or, nearby or
I
something.
would say don't coach. That isn't my approach to monitoring. But through knowing what the target is, you can monitor in a different way. But all the time you're keeping very sort of bland and very not leading them, but just noticing what they get. But once you start to experience it, you'll know better what to do. And that's where personally I would rather, when you early days of monitoring, have a simple target that you can sort of have a go at and do a stage 1 and really keep it very simple and we do textures and then a major gestalt, and it's don't be too logical and don't be too trying to have to define what it is, but just experience doing it. I did it with someone and I'd got this wasn't a really simple target, but the Trafalgar Square with Nelson's column, and she ended up with Nelson with a chest with his uniform in it, and it was a purple uniform, and she was so totally with that, but the actual target was Trafalgar Square.
Mhm.
So she'd got aspects of that as well, and it's really, you notice how they're doing, but keep bland as you're noticing, and it will enhance your own viewing. And so, and then she might have a go at monitoring you, but I was hoping for that. But so far, I've had other people that really, they need to do the proper training to be able to monitor even, but do training as a viewer, not necessarily as a monitor.
Okay,
So-
so if I can just jump in here, if you have remote viewing training, you're kind of like lined up to try monitoring. Is I think what I'm hearing.
Well, with my basic stages 1 to 6 5-day training, we get everybody sitting sitting next to the monitor on day 3, and then starting to do some monitoring on day 4 and 5. And so it's only early days of the monitoring, but they've got us next to them. So we are helping them to monitor and guiding their monitoring. But that really helps all of the viewers as monitor, but also their own viewing. So
Okay,
that's-
and when you're doing a monitoring session, the viewer has to speak out loud everything that they write down, right?
Well, you do that whether you're being monitored or not. You should
Oh,
always
okay.
speak
You
it
should
out
be
loud,
doing-
because as soon as you speak out loud, you're using more of your senses, and you're getting it out there in a different way. So even if you're working on your own, which I call self-monitoring, you definitely express it out loud. Don't do it just in your head.
Yeah, you
Ever.
should, Don, you should do every session vocalized. So when I do solo sessions, I sit here in the basement, and if somebody were to walk in and look at me talking to myself, they'd think I was mad. But by doing that, and Julie's right, you take that thing, you turn it into something, and you put it out there, and now that pipe, that theoretical pipe that data's flowing down, the more you objectify, the purer your flow is.
Okay, I didn't know that. I
Yeah.
never heard that before.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
So Paul, if you don't narrate your session out loud, you'll get the Buddhist monk cane across the back of your neck. Julie, were you done?
Yeah, I'm
Oh, okay.
fine. I
So
might go to sleep now.
there's a technical distinction that doesn't get made very often publicly. Monitor was actually for training, and then the advanced sessions were actually, the role was called interviewer. So when you're looking at monitoring, you definitely want to get some information about it first, but like Julie said, step out and play with it. Just try to understand the consequences of, it gets down to your tone of voice. It gets down to your expression. There's so many things, because that reader's pre-conscious is scanning everything for the answer to be right. And I remember sitting there trying desperately to read Paul. So, if I would say out loud a couple of things, I kind of look up, like, what's the look on his face? Did he, so when you become conscious of how crafty you can be trying to be right, it's interesting. Now, in the controlled remote viewing guide, there is some monitor feedback descriptions there. So what you want to do, and the reason it's called a monitor during training, so the person writes blue and you say correct.
Yeah.
And that's to build confidence. Or if they say green and there's no green, you just simply don't say anything. And then they're like, oh, shoot, I didn't get the reward. And so that kind of helps. Again, that's almost like using a template. Don't become dependent on that aspect of it.
Okay. All right. So let me just summarize what I'm hearing. For training purposes, the monitor can say correct or nothing.
Right.
Or I think there was another word, something like nearby or something like that.
Near, can't feed back. So for instance, let's say I, as the training monitor, which means we can only be blind. I have to know what the target is to monitor.
Yeah.
Can't be
Right.
double blind.
Right.
And then when you get to the role of interviewer, that was typically double blind, where the interviewer themselves did not know. So when they're looking at the viewer session, they can't lead you. They just are like, I wonder what that means. So their questions are as sincere as yours.
But that's where I don't ever do the saying correct and stuff. I just keep totally bland, and they just record. And it's then deciding, right, well, what stage are we doing? Either put it on the left-hand side. If you need to put it on the right-hand side, you do. But I would never say that is correct or whatever.
Yeah, but that is how Ingo trained everybody. Bill Ray, Paul, Ed.
That's in Tom McNair's manual.
Tom McNair.
Yeah, that might be how you've been trained, but as you quite often say, Russell, I was trained differently, and that is how I train. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and I respect that. Absolutely. I'm just referring back to Ingo. It was really important. And that's why in the CRV manual, they literally tell you what the indicators are or what you say. Now, the other thing as a monitor that they discovered and was driven home in training, in particular in an incident that I learned something from Bill Ray, I was like, well, what should I do? And he's like, the viewer is in charge of the session, Russell. What do you want to do? You tell me to be quiet. You tell me you don't want in-session feedback. You tell me to give you a movement command. And that had a big part to play in at least reducing what they call telepathic overlay. So in Ingo's essays, when they actually brought in hypnotists, a psychologist, all these people, and the closest thing to a solution was that the viewer's in charge. Because if the viewer felt that the monitor was in charge, the viewer would be empathetic and wanting to please the monitor, and that would create a bad dynamic where now you might be probing the monitor's mind for a solution to the problem. So when you do this, especially with new people, put them in charge. Let them realize, as the viewer, I'm the one producing the data. I'm the one in charge. And that was you can even look that up in Ingo's essays. And
All right, Russell, real quick, and I don't want to belabor this because I'm sure Ida has been waiting patiently here. So,
okay, yeah.
But the thing is, does the monitor give the movement commands, or what's the point of the monitor if they're not interacting?
You can say, would you like a movement command?
Okay, so you always ask the viewer.
Well, every monitor has their own style, and there's different theories, like everything. I mean, I wish there were cut and dried answers. I would love that. But so yes, that is normally with Bill and Paul. Would you like a movement command?
Okay.
Yes. Would you like a reminder on stage 2? So as an example, I for a while just wasn't even thinking about taste or smell.
Right.
So I would write down texture, sounds, colors, and then all of a sudden, so now I get to a certain point. Oh yeah, are there any smells? I can ask myself. But they said, would you like some S2 reminder? Are there any or describe any smells at the site?
Okay, I'm starting to get a feel for how this works. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, but you got to step out and do it. So when I monitor my brother, I monitor Nancy, I monitor Catherine routinely, and Julie's spot on. It will teach you so much about your own viewing. You're like, come on. In your mind, you're like, you're almost there. Just say it. And then they don't. And then you're like, oh, how come these people don't just spit it out? And then you're like, oh, because I don't either. So you'll find it an enriching experience. The thing you don't want to do, though, just even in your experimental stage, is don't ever let them feel wrong.
Okay.
Never have a negative response.
Yeah, that's the bottom line right there.
And if you do have some feedback that might say, hey, if you've done this, knock first. Say, look, I have a suggestion, but do you mind if I offer the suggestion? And if they say, oh no, and most people do, they're like, hell yeah, I want a suggestion. But just keep them in the master's position, in charge, competent, happy, and relaxed. When you're monitoring, you're going to build the state of mind that they're going to view in the future.
All right, thank you.
Keep that spirit in mind. All right, Daz, anybody else? Otherwise, I'm going to call on Ida. How about we go to Ida? Ida's been very patient. Ida, hello. Are you still awake?
Oh, I'm just absolutely fascinated by this. Okay, first of all, I would like to thank you all for all the suggestions that, I recovered from the Machu Picchu thing. However, my computer must be listening, because all week long, Machu Picchu, that in fact, it's that particular photo, and welcome to Machu Picchu. We'll give you a trip. Here's what we provide on the trips. And I just laugh at it now because it's showing up in my feed line all the time.
Are you able to look at the pictures without getting dizzy?
Oh, well, I never did get dizzy just looking at the picture. It was just doing that practice.
Oh, right.
It was just doing that practice because my feet weren't on the ground. In fact, somebody discussed it with me, and it was like, the only, I mean, it definitely was not altitude sickness. Someone suggested that. And it's like, no, one time I've had altitude sickness. It was not that. This was just that experience of being way up high, just suddenly takes your breath away. In fact, it reconfirmed that, you know, I have some birthdays that I've been plotting out what I'm going to do, and I'm definitely going to do the skydiving, and I will do paragliding again. Just not in the location where I was thinking about doing it. I wrote a very specific question, which, let me see if I can find it. Oh, good grief. Does anybody else see it? Okay, it's about remote staring. Okay, I found the article from 2008, IRVA, because I was very curious about remote detection and the remote directed energy. I don't know if you've been, there's a big project right now. They originally were calling it the Havana effect, and we're writing it off as hypochondria and malingering and all kinds of this, except that it was affecting families of employees that were in these different embassies. And now it's more worldwide. And in the article on remote staring, which is, I mean, it's a research article. There's a lot of, you know, I'm working my way through it one sentence at a time type thing. But the main thing is people are monitored using EEG. Now, I've had that type of research. I've participated in those kinds of projects. And so what I'm wondering is, would that be a viable experiment or practice? I mean, if you happen to know a doctor that's going to hook you up with an EEG, that when you're doing these, to know when somebody's looking back at you. Or now, I mean, I have a cat and 2 dogs, and lately they've been kind of, especially the cat, doing the staring at something that isn't their routine. And no, I don't have ghosts or any of that kind of thing. There's no energy in this house except mine. But it's like, you know, I want to put up a big sign mentally that says, go away, leave me alone. I like to sleep at night. So I'm wondering, using an EEG as a detector, that's the word I was looking for, as a detector, to understand whether it would measure EMG in effect, because that does have an effect on people, or whether it's subsonic sound, which also has an effect on people. And it's more convenient to use EEG than an elephant, because an elephant does hear subsonic. I don't have room for an elephant in my backyard, or anybody else. I wouldn't imagine an embassy would want an elephant in their garden. But what are the ramifications in remote viewing of this type of directed energy? I mean, some people call it remote influences, and I can't remember who said, oh yes, I think it was a Stargate person, that somebody came and said, we really need to get rid of this particular Soviet official. And the response was, well, I can do remote influencing and convince him that the Soviet Union is going to disintegrate. I mean, that is my vague recollection of what was on the video. And so I've been toying with this whole concept of what would happen if we do these, in doing these various sessions, if we're hooked up to EEGs.
Well,
And then I have a second personal experience that's kind of
do you want to do the question first, or put the personal experience and then
the personal experience? I think maybe because you brought it up, you say it every time we have one of these sessions, is the thing about being perfect. And in my life, this is hard to describe because I don't know that very many people experience this kind of thing. I grew up on a ranch. I was literally riding before I was born because it was, my mother didn't follow the rules in those days. So riding came naturally, you know, horseback, whatever animal. It was a very different childhood than your average person, average girl for sure, in the USA. I have to be specific. But there was always this thing about, if you're going to do it, there's a right way and there's a wrong way. If you're going to do it, you do it the right way. And the right way was perfect, the way my parents perceived it to be perfect. I bought a piano when I was 8 years old. And my father was immediately upset that I couldn't just play the piano like, I don't know, the people that were on the radio, or, you know, it was like, well, you've had the piano 2 weeks now. Haven't you learned something by now? You know, and I was still practicing on Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So the drive to be perfect, I'm wrestling with that concept, because if you're not going to get, if you're in the training, if you're not going to get feedback, which I did have when I trained, but if you're not going to get some feedback in that very beginning, then it's like a baby. Why aren't you running a marathon instead of crawling? I mean, this whole thing about you're not going to be perfect. Well, how does somebody know if they're on the right path if you're not getting feedback? That's like the personal experience that I wanted to share.
Okay.
Now, the main question is, because of all these I don't know if mechanical is the right word, but it's, you know, it not only are remote influencing from human beings, or a massed group of human beings, you know, a cult, Trump, whoever, but without that massed influence belief system, that's remote influencing. Terrible things have happened because of that kind of influencing. People who are in that have been in these embassies or in these military installations that they've had serious physiological problems happen and are now medically retired, or some of them have gone deaf from these, what they now call directed energy, and they're trying not to use the term electromagnetic pulses. It's like, isn't this all directed energy? And would setting up EEGs be a good way to monitor these effects?
Okay, so let's go back and start. So the first thing being stared at, typically Rupert Sheldrake is known for the most substantial research, and it seems very demonstrable and repeatable that people do know when another person is placing a lot of attention on them. Whether that's actually coming from the eyes is one thing. If you read Ingo's Psychic Sexuality, he talks about an event where his perception opened up and he was in a room full of people and he could see somebody like a little energetic tendril go all the way across the room and then touch down on top of the other person's head, like they were interested in him and were curious. And so people sense that and they turn around. And I think subjectively, each of us can verify that. So that is a reality. Now, when it comes to the EEG, Ingo was hooked up to every possible kind of device, as were some of the other experimental viewers. They did it in a Faraday cage. They did all these things. In fact, sketching entered remote viewing because when Ingo was so wired up, he would go to talk, to explain, and things would jiggle around and it would break him off the signal line. And so one day he's sitting there with the people working with him at the ASPR, and he said, "Hey, wait, I'm an artist. Give me a clipboard and a pen." So stage 3 sketching actually happened back then, before SRI even started, where he could sit still and then just sketch what he was perceiving, as opposed to having to try to verbalize it and then have everything go haywire. One of the things, and people don't really realize this, in fact, Ed May commented on it in one place where he said Ingo has an incredible awareness of his own inner processes. Where that came from actually was all the years and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours working with an e-meter. Forget everything you've heard about e-meters and Scientology. All that thing was is a Wheatstone bridge. Carl Jung was using it in 1905 when he explored the collective subconscious. So if he was putting something there with imagination, he didn't get a read. If he went to something, a live wire that actually had its own energy, he got a response. So the Wheatstone bridge was the original quote unquote lie detector also. As that came about, that group took a version of it from someone else. They did not invent it themselves, and then they took credit. But Ingo did work with it. So as an example, okay, this is the one that I work with, and it's highly advanced. It's an incredible thing. More and more and more counselors now, just straight counselors, are using these in sessions all the time. The most interesting use I've read about is they have a man or a couple. Okay, let's say a couple hooked up, going through couples counseling, and if you can't get your charge, so to speak, down to a green light, you can't speak. So if you're in the red, you're hushed up. So you actually learn, and it's just biofeedback. That's all it is. So you actually learn to calm down before you're permitted to speak or whatever with the partner. So I think that's one interesting use. I have thousands of hours working with this, and I have tested it with remote viewing. And when you're getting incoming data, you can see it. So when Ingo worked, and he would have, he probably would have used one at least for 1,000 hours just for his solo self-clearing. So he learned the difference between signal and imagination in part through that device. Okay. So you wouldn't have to go necessarily to, the full EEG type of thing. Now they have technology and all this stuff that the young people have come up with. I don't know anything about. So someone else would have to respond to that. However, now another experiment, being the weirdo that I am, I got basically one of these ghost hunting devices, and that detects EMF. In this part, please discard as craziness. But when I've had a telepathic session, when I'm working with someone, sometimes a being connected to them will appear. I don't do mediumship. I just have the person, my session partner, describe. But I've had this set up, and when the being appeared, this responded. And that surprised the hell out of me, to be honest. So if you were looking for a quote unquote psychic alarm system, This thing, has a little stand that you can set up, a little antenna that you can pull out, sensitivity settings. And if you had it set, and presumably, obviously not provably, if an electromagnetic field of a natural source, let's say spirit, a being, ghost, however, or a microwave. So I've taken this around and checked our outlets and our fuse box and things, and it picks up the electromagnetic spectrum. So in all of this stuff I've done to verify and double verify all the things that I worry about being true or not being true, those are two of the best things. In regard to, did you read the thread I started in Daz's group about they just detected these directed energy weapons at the White House?
I did not know about the White House.
Yeah.
I knew about the Havana. I had some friends who were in the diplomatic corps when I lived out in Scottsdale,
Yeah.
and this
So-
was years ago. And they were being treated by the Mayo Clinic.
Correct. So yesterday, CNN just had headline that they've detected directed energy weapons near the White House. Several media outlets have also covered it. The specialist on this is a man named James Giordano, and he spoke at the last IRVA 2020. He's a neurologist and he works for DARPA. He's, excuse me, he's so intelligent, it's scary. I was mesmerized by his clarity and his just forthright presence. So in that thread, or in that post that I started in Daz's group, there's an hour and some long talk. He goes and talks at West Point and war colleges, and he tells the troops, in your career, you will experience this. The brain is the new battlefield. And he's so forthright about it. And like I say, his intelligence is unsettling. So he knows. He actually was in a little documentary on TV that Paul had a segment in, and he was the last segment. I can't remember what that was called right now. So I put a bunch of links. There's also a short link, just like 5 minutes and 56 seconds, where he gets to the core of the matter. And it's just a new reality. And are these human to human devices? Certainly. Is it possible if this UAP disclosure, these incidents that the Pentagon has now confirmed, could they, whoever they are, be utilizing, and certainly if they're advanced enough to do what they can do with their craft or whatever those vehicles or mechanisms are, certainly this would also then be available to them. We're entering a new frontier now, and the best thing, and I've done a lot of training on this, the best thing you can do is know your own voice. Get so accustomed to you, to how you think, how you feel, and that's the best alarm system. So there's times where, I'll feel something off, and sometimes it's over there, or sometimes it's a little closer. But by knowing and having your own energetic sphere under control, as soon as an intruder, think of like the electric fence. Okay, that's designed to keep dogs in, or pets in. But imagine the inverse, where as soon as you feel your personal field disturbed, then you just simply place your attention. The way I handle these things, and sometimes they do happen, you have to be really prudent about imagination. It's going to happen. You're not going to avoid making something up, but there's times where it's kind of certain, and nobody wants unwanted attention on them, whether it's from a remote viewer, a spaceship, or a foreign government. Who of us wants? The key to that, in my opinion, Ida, and we've talked privately, is this: a deep, deep, deep realization of our individual rights to free will, primarily to the contents of our own mental space. We get convinced by TVs. We drive down a mile of road and 40 billboards have gone by, and everybody wants to get something from you. They want to be in your pockets. And, so the same way you kind of handle that, these more nebulous or factually invisible phenomena, it's the same thing. Just simply, and don't go into opposition or start, getting in a telepathic war. That's never going to work. Doesn't work any better than physical war. Just place your attention elsewhere. Politely and gently, look, I have the right to my own mental space, and please respect that, and then move on. So as a comparison, think of when you walk down the street and then you have somebody panhandling you, or somebody saying, hey, come over here and buy the watch. How do you disconnect from those people? How do you just keep your focus, keep going towards your destination, acknowledge them? You don't stop and start arguing with the panhandler, and you don't stop and start arguing with this guy whether the watch is authentic or not. You just simply stay your course, use prudence. Ultimately, in the end, and I don't mean to go cosmic on you here, but the true defender, or the true source or enforcer, if you will, of our free will is however we perceive our source. And when something greater than me hits me, I'm the first one to say, this is greater than me. And I'll just step aside and intend that source work through. Also, human synergy. If you've got a group of a few people and you have synchronized energy, in other words, that's that thing where two people linked on a goal, they somehow exponentially have the power of 5 people, not just 2.
Exactly.
So in all of these things that that you're concerned about, I've played with these. This detector does pick up stuff. The galvanic skin response does indicate certain things. Ingo used that I believe, and in certain ways he kind of implies it, is how he learned the difference between the signal line and not. The same way that Carl Jung learned the difference between his imagination and the actual collective conscious. So anyways, I've gone on long enough.
I have a question about is that the last meter you were talking about that you took around the house with the EMF? Is that one that Gary Galka created, manufactured?
That I don't know. What I did was I went and looked at the ghost hunting websites, looked at the type of technology that they used. I found one that kind of seemed to be universally used. Now I've had this 3 years, so there might be something way better now. And then I went to Amazon and found it.
Okay, well, he calls the original name for the one that he upgrades it. It's called the Mel meter.
Yeah, that's what this one is.
Okay, Gary Galka is the designer and creator of that.
The Mel meter.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So, anyways, like I said, I went on quite a while there, but the topic that you brought up is a passion of mine. So what I will say to end is, I don't think you have to worry about being perfect. We all consider you perfect. So now you have been blessed, and go forth and don't be
all right. You're funny. That's funny. I just want to be competent and proficient.
Well, in our conversations and with your psychology experience, I've never doubted your competence, and I've learned a lot from you. So I appreciate that.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Russell. Okay, well, everyone stay safe. Please continue to do all the right things for your health.
Okay. All right. So are you going hand down now?
I know. I'm trying to find where I have a actual literal visual processing issue, and to find all the buttons.
I think I can take your hand down for you. Do you want me to? Do you want me to remotely take your hand down? I'll take that as a yes. So there we go. Okay. So Rich.
Yeah. 2 quick questions. I think they're quick. So I've been reflecting on some things, and I feel like I'm naturally very intuitive, except for the fact that I'm wrong all the time. And what I mean by that is like there's a statistical, I feel like, um, uh, what word am I trying to think of? Anomaly or whatever. So like, you get like an intuitive feeling, go left or right. Uh, Inevitably, every time I get the feeling go left, well, the answer is right. It's up, oh, it's down. It's always the opposite. Is that common? Is there a term for that? Should I embrace that and just say, okay, when I get that really strong feeling over here, just write down the opposite? Or should I move that, try to guide that intuition towards actuality?
Have you ever seen Men Who Stare at Goats?
I have, but like when it first came out, I
Do
just
you
remember Jeff Bridges. That's all I remember.
Remember the one scene where George Clooney, they were over running in a little rattle trap car. They pull up to a T intersection, and he is, the great remote viewer, so forth and so on. And he takes a right, and then the camera pans back in about a quarter of a mile. They hit an EED, and the car gets blown over.
No, I think I do remember that. Yeah. Yeah.
Remember, I laughed so damn hard.
Yeah.
The typical name for that is counter intention, where you intend to do something, have the right answer, and then there's some mechanism. I actually one time, a long time ago, when I was studying this, emailed Dean Radin and asked him, because I was using one of the little ESP trainers on the Irvis site.
Yeah.
And it's like, how, and so he surprised me and said, there really isn't a good answer for that. And so I was like, well, crap, what good is your PhD anyway? When you get into outguessing it still is going to operate the same. You can, for a while, choose the opposite choice and have a little bit of success. But whatever this counterintention system adapts, it's going to double out thinking.
It's gonna switch again.
So he's going to feel
Interesting.
left, which means he's going to choose right. So now this thing has to be on the left.
Yeah.
So it gets into literally chasing your own tail.
Mm.
One of the things about it is we all, whether we know it or like it or not, do kind of have a certain negative expectation for certain outcomes. Well, I'm no good, or I never win at cards, or, I can't make a basketball throw for anything. So by letting some of that stuff come up naturally and acknowledging it, it tends to simmer down. There are bigger theories. Like I read an interesting theory on this universe that kind of looks at it as a trickster, where things are 180 degrees out. That which you want tends to go away from you, and that which you resist tends to stick to you. So the only way that I've found, one, is add a lot of humor to the situation, but to try to take a step back, because the only reason what positive and neutral is, I'm sorry, positive and negative, is because there's a third position, which is neutral. And this is the case with car batteries, or you call it the ground, whatever you want. So somehow you as a being can take that neutral position, and here is your positive terminal, here's your negative terminal. You combine those, and now you have power. So if you can control the power from a neutral position, you can create effects without the counterintention.
Okay.
The other problem is, since we're in a co-creation, you might be outvoted. So if you're sitting there trying and you want to move,
Sure.
A tin cup on the table. So you're staring, and you want this thing to slide across the table, and like, yay, Okay, well, if there's 100 people there that don't want that tin cup to move, consciously or unconsciously, you probably won't overcome the co-creation aspect.
Okay.
So since other beings are always involved in these things, there could be somebody really wanting you to make the wrong choice, this, that, the other. But if you try that, find a neutral position, you control the positive and the negative, create the power, don't get into one polarity or the other.
Okay.
Just
I like that. Very, very middle path Buddhist
Well,
kind of approach to it.
it's neutral. And the only
Yeah.
reason, like, just like think of your own body, the only reason you can call this your left hand and this your right hand, because you have a center position from which you're referring to those two things.
Sure.
So when you're differentiating one thing from the other, there's always the third position. And taking it, you could go through every kind of, it's just a decision. Just start with it. It's the same way. It's like, open your hand. Okay. I don't know how I open my hand, all the nerves and, all of the factors. Close your hand. And I don't doubt that I can do it. I'm just dead certain I can open my hand and close my hand. And I have no idea what neurons did what part of my brain did. I just intended it, and it was so.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you. It's glad to know that there's a name to that. So that's comforting. I guess, yeah, when I think about it, intention, I have a huge issue with, because I guess I have intention ADD or something, because if I'm doing 2 sessions back to back, when I get feedback on the first one, I'm completely off. And then when I get feedback on the second one, I realize my first session described the second one perfectly. So it's just all over the place. But so I think that's something I need to work on. But my second question is, I think it was Lynn Buchanan in one of his books, where he mentioned that there's some like exercises outside of remote viewing that you can do that aid in remote viewing. And so one of them was every single time, like, be religious about it. Every single time you enter a doorway, either to the restroom or another room outside the house, try to get a vibe for the general energy of that room. And then, for the idea that it would make you more sensitive. Are there things that you guys do like that isn't necessarily in a session that you do to practice, but outside of it that helps aid like
Yeah.
that?
Paul teaches one thing, but he calls that the ambiance exercise.
Okay, that's what it was. Maybe it was Paul Smith who said that. Yeah.
No. Lynn.
He did.
Lynn's practice is called the ambiance exercise, and it's elaborated. I can't remember, but it's elaborated well in the Seventh Sense.
Yes. Yep.
So when you change rooms, recording the difference between one room and the other is hugely important. There's even, similar types practices in certain type of monastery situations. So that if you're remote viewing and you can tell the difference between your nonsense and signal line. I mean, that's one great application of it. But the change, the feeling, the energy, the temperature difference, the breeze, if you can become that sensitive to be able to change rooms and record the difference, and that's the key to it, a change has occurred. We tend to go from one room into the next, and we're carrying the last room in our memory. So when we go in the new room, we've polluted the new room with the past. So if you can make that conscious change, so, whether it's right at the threshold of the door, that's useful. They found that people like who'd been driving the same driveway for, 10 years going to their house, they could put things out or make changes and the people wouldn't notice because effectively they were driving the driveway in their memory.
Mm.
And so this is an exercise of simply recording the subtleties, the differences. It's exceptional. And by practicing it, you will heighten all of your perceptions. Now, the thing that Paul teaches and took us out and actually did is going somewhere, sit up on a hill, find a spot in the woods, and practice describing your environment with adjectives only. And it's fascinating. All of a sudden, and I remember when we did it, there was 4 of us. We were out in the middle of nowhere. We went out, saw these really cool petroglyphs and so forth. And it was icy dang cold. Like, I think it was below 30, maybe in the 20s. And the wind was kind of howling and there's hills in the distance and it was kind of duskish. So we stood out in the center of this gravel road the 5 of us, or no, 6, because Angela was there, 6 of us, and we took turns describing. So like there was this little sign, and it was in the wind. So it came to me, and I was like rattling. Okay, then someone else tuned into a different aspect of that sound, and you know, you say buzzing or humming, and when you go around, and now you're starting to look for. So then suddenly now, oh gosh, I can feel the weight on my feet, or I can feel an extra big piece of gravel pushing on my shoe, or oh shoot, there is a little gap here in my collar, and my neck's cold. Suddenly, by wanting to describe these things as adjectives only without any naming, you can't believe the things that suddenly you become aware of that were below your threshold of awareness before. And so when I take walks down at the park, you know, I'll look at the grass and describe it to myself, or look at a tree and describe it. Not all the time, but when I think of it, or I want some practice. So between the ambiance exercise and then going to a real environment, like right here, you know, because okay, wooden, glassy, black, this, that, the other, we could go on all, you could probably sit here for 3 hours and use just adjectives. And when you do that, you realize you could get contradictory descriptions in something. So a lot of times in a session, you'll get black, and then white will come, and oh gosh, I got white because I got black. Not necessarily. My shirt is black and it's white both.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's rough, or you know, you get to the collar, it's thick. So you could get contradictory descriptions, and logically you'd like to weed those out. This will teach you not to. This, you know, I'm looking at a mirror that's in a barnwood frame. That's glassy and smooth and rough.
Yep. Interesting.
So when you start to do it, so between Lynn's ambiance and this describing the media place that you're in with adjectives only, I find both of those very useful.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Russell.
So Daz, and you got anything you want to throw in here, or are you enjoying your day off?
I was just listening. The only thing I can add is when I go out for walks, and I try to go out every day for between 3 and 6 miles. I make myself aware of trying to get my stage 2 senses involved. So everything I pass, I like try to run my fingers over and recognize all the different textures and tastes and smells, all that kind of thing, as I'm going along. You know, make a mental kind of like library record of everything that I can find in day-to-day life. You know, all the different things that I can touch on that.
I'd never thought of that. Now see, there's 3 things I can do. No, I will try that. I hadn't thought of that, where you just touch things, because the way I learned, you know, we were just standing out in the middle of the road, nobody was going to run over and touch the rocks or the signs. So yeah, add physical sensories to it.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. So where is everybody at in terms of questions, comments?
I think we've answered all the questions in the chat. There's just lots of, you know, chats and answers to previous questions and stuff.
Okay. Is there anybody that has opinions or personal experience with the things that have come up that you would like to add your perspective to? There it is.
I just joined the chat like 20 seconds ago, so I have no idea what you're talking about.
Let me catch you up real quick. We someone asked, is there a God? We found the answer, described it, and subsequently came up with a list of solutions for everything in the universe. And I'm very sorry you were late.
Yeah.
Bad timing, man. No, it's just been a great conversation with all kinds of interesting questions. So now that you're here, what can you interject to stir the pot and get us going?
What? Well, I mean, evil doesn't exist, so I mean that takes all the boring stuff out, right?
Well, no, until 20 seconds ago it didn't.
Yeah, what? No dog telepathy tonight. What was the last question that Daz was replying about doing stage 2 stuff out and about?
Oh, Daz.
What was the question that was the answer to?
What types of exercises might one do just in their normal daily routine. So the example given the first was Lynn Buchanan's ambiance exercise. Then an exercise I adapted from Paul, where I look around, I look at my curtains, and I try to describe them with only adjectives. And then Daz went to a thing he does where like he would actually go touch the curtain. I was just talking basically about optically describing. So Daz uses tangible, tactile interactions to learn the feelings and describe those things with
That was
adjectives.
when I joined. Okay, I've got one then. Move your actual awareness into objects. Just pick, I've done it, I pick random stuff on my desk or when I'm walking around, or plants, animals, people, which is kind of gross. But if you put your awareness into this, it feels hollow and rattling. Can you hear that noise? And things feel metallic. And it's a really interesting contrast to stage 2 perceptions, because you get perceptions in stage 2 and it's like, oh, this feels hollow, it must be a big space. But actually, if you move your mind inside this and feel it, it feels the same. So it helps you get rid of some of the AOL. And it's just really interesting. You put your perception inside solid objects and it gives you a really direct stage 2 perception. That, I mean, it depends. Some people just get words in stage 2, right? So I guess you could try doing that. But what I do is really put my actual awareness into the thing, and it has a feeling. And then I find that's useful when I'm doing stage 2. I feel those sorts of feelings sometimes. So it gives me a bigger library of what that feels like. And I wouldn't necessarily know what it felt like by looking at the object. You know, I wouldn't know, what does it feel like? This is a steel rule, right? What does it feel like inside there? If you stage 2 the internal structure of this, you got no idea. But if you just look at it, be in it, feel inside it, you can get stage 2 data, right? You know, you could do that if it was a blind target. You can do it when it's not. So that's my taking it, the weirdness up to 11 answer to that, which now the answers that you've got run the full gamut.
David, I forget. Do you meditate?
Not at the moment. I have done a bit.
Yeah.
I said quite a lot.
I just know that there's in some of the traditions, I guess, or not traditions, but like methodologies, I guess. It's talking about moving awareness throughout the body.
Yeah.
And then practicing that first, and then moving it on to objects, quote unquote, external to you, if you prefer the Buddhist point of view. But
I think either viewpoint is valid, right?
yeah, that's true. But that's interesting. Thanks for that.
Yeah, good. Give it a try.
Yeah, I will.
Move your perception inside that beer. Feel all the bubbles.
See, I moved the beer inside of me, so now it's experiencing me.
I think Russell's popped out for a second. So if anyone's got any other questions they want to ask,
If anybody
go
wants
ahead.
to say anything rude about Russell, now is your only opportunity.
Hey, has anyone seen, I think it was on one of the Facebook remote viewing groups, about some app that was going to be like, you know, what do you want in a remote viewing app?
Oh, I think that was Brett.
Yeah. What is that? I mean, does he intend us to like do ideograms with our finger, or, you know, what?
I'm not sure. Like, you'd have to ask him, but he's got some funding from some mysterious donor, which is not the recently controversial people. Somebody else, to develop an app to do. I mean, I think he wants to focus on ARV, but I think that's kind of where it's going to start off, and then he wants to build from there. So you'd have to ask him. I'm not familiar with what and I'm not sure there is a grand plan at the moment. You know, I think he was canvassing for opinions and what viewers would like.
Ideas or whatever. Okay.
And I know a lot of people do remote viewing tournament, really enjoy that because it gives them convenient daily practice, but then they all have issues with displacement, and there's always people coming onto the Reddit going, oh, I did this amazing session on the wrong target. Why does this happen? I'm like, we've got a stock answer that we just copy and paste for them now. It's called like, why do you suck at remote viewing tournament? It describes displacement and all the rest of it and how it's a stupid way to practice RV. So yeah, a lot of people really appreciate having that convenience in the mobile app, but you know, Brett wants to build one that's more good, I think, and maybe has more opportunity for people making money off financial ARVs.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll check in with him then. Thank you.
Hey Daz, I got a follow-up question for you real quick. Did that sensory exercise, is that something that Ingo taught you when you were visiting him? I thought I remember you saying something like that. Maybe I'm remembering wrong.
No, it's just something I do when I don't do it when I'm out with my partner because we're obviously talking and stuff. But when I'm alone, yeah, just listening to music and stuff. I just consciously, run my if I'm walking past a metal fence or something, I run my fingers at the fence I try to make a mental note of of the sensations I'm feeling, so that I try to record it in some kind of memory Rolodex there somewhere.
Yeah,
But
I remember you said that a long time ago. I was doing that a couple weeks ago on a bike bike ride.
Yeah,
it's kind of cool. So I do it.
And you can do it smell, smell more, look around more, just be a bit more cognizant as you're out in a park or something. The more memories we have to fall back on in remote viewing to recognize data, the better. Anyone have any last questions? Russell's back. You can stop talking about him now.
Yeah. Shh. I can add something weird on top of what you just said, Daz, seeing as that's now my job. It's not just about building a memory bank, it's about getting used to the subtler aspects of your senses. So in a lot of the more magical, esoteric traditions, it'd be like going to sit in the woods and then look at every last pine needle and every last wrinkle on every leaf and hear all the tiny little sounds and kind of get better at using your physical senses. So not just to perceive more stuff and get a bigger library, but to get more acute with the physical senses, because it's that skill of paying really detailed attention to them that you can then apply to the non-physical perception, which, I mean, even I don't know whether it works, but it's a lovely thing to do. It's very relaxing.
That sounds like the beginning of the avatar training, Star's Edge avatar training, where you have to go out and do directed attention on a specific item. How many pine needles? Not only count the pine needles, but differentiate among the pine needles. And yeah, that was.
Yeah, I was surprised recently to find out that Ingo did Avatar. So he actually did it with his niece as well. And Avatar was an individual who left Scientology and
Harry Palmer.
Yeah. So something else that popped into mind, I completely spaced out, is and maybe you guys mentioned it while I was gone or something, but vocabulary building. I will actually look up any words that I have any doubt about while I'm reading. And so I look at it and, and I've been using that word for 50 years. And then I'll look in the dictionary and go, eek, I really didn't know the full nuance or so forth of that word. So that's a good thing, because if that vocabulary gets into your pre-conscious and something comes up, now a word can attach it as it boils up and gets expressed. One thing I want to do, I kind of heard maybe Daz winding down. We're in 2.5 hours. I wanted to offer an opportunity, if she wishes to speak, to Andra. She'd had a couple of she had a private question, and so Andra, if you'd like to jump in and communicate your thoughts and questions, please at any time feel free to do so. So is there anything else pressing, compelling, interesting, or should we head towards wrapping up here? Okay.
Russell, have you come up with a schedule on, what was it, the top 5 topics or 4? I'm sorry, I can't remember at the moment.
I do have those, and by the nature of these conversations, about 3 of them have been addressed. So next week is Lori Williams with Daz as the host. And then the week after that, I'll look that list over. That's a good suggestion. I'll refresh myself on the contents. And
I have another guest as well for the week after.
Oh, okay. So
the week after that's going to be John Herlowski.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. That'll be great. And then prior to that, maybe you want to put a link out to his book.
Yeah.
His book has some really interesting accounts, some subjective experiences, one of which actually impacted me powerfully. And so maybe, when John's being advertised, we should put links up to his book so people can pre-familiarize themselves. He trained with a number of people. He had the good fortune of meeting Ingo as well. And I've always enjoyed John's perspective a lot. So Ida, so that's 2. So there's going to be Lori, then there's going to be John. And if Daz doesn't get a guest for the 3rd week, then I'll review that list that we did by voting. So
Awesome.
With that said, I believe we'll do a little countdown and wrap this up. So if anybody has anything they need to say, now is the time, or forever hold your peace.
Thank you for all of the suggestions. Enjoyed it.
Thank you for all your questions. It's just everybody's question benefits. I came out of this today with like 5 new things. And so it's great. And what better use, this all started back when Dad said, what should we do during lockdown? Now, various people are going back into lockdowns, et cetera. I think this is one of the best things that's happened for our community in a long time. And I love it. I look forward to every single one. So as usual, I will thank Daz for allowing me to co-host, every participant here, all of your questions, all of Rich's questions, all of Ida's observations and commentary. Every bit of it's appreciated, okay?
Yeah.
So with that said, I am going to end and thank everybody.
Thanks a bunch, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.